Good evening. Welcome to Bhagavad Gita on this beautiful day here in Florida, Wednesday, April 5th at our scheduled time, 7 p.m. So thank you all for joining me. I'll begin as I normally do with the invocation mantras of respect to the principle of teacher on our spiritual path, to our principle of teacher, and also to our individual teachers, in my case, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Om Jnana Timurandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Guru Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapodantikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastatya Deshata Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay. It's always nice to begin any swadhyaya, any session, discussion, a nice meditation to kind of put our minds in the proper place of hearing Because basically that's, according to the Vedas, there's 4 elements to the learning process, and the first is hearing. So to begin by creating a suitable environment, both externally, it's really nice to have an external environment that's clean and orderly, because that helps the mind become a little peaceful. I know I'm very affected by my environment. And secondly, to create an internal environment. So that's what the chanting of mantras that we do at the beginning, it tries to help us create that internal environment and allows it to be receptive to hear. Because after hearing, according to the Vedas, the second aspect of the learning process is reflection. So if we hear effectively, then we can reflect on what we've heard. But if we don't, if we're scattered, if our minds are not settled and we're not able to focus it, then there's not so much there to reflect upon, because mostly the mind's here, hither, thither, and yon. So that's the second dimension of the learning process. And then the real challenge, once we've heard, we've effectively reflected on what we've heard, then is, can we take a point out of what we've heard and apply it in our lives? Can we assimilate it and implement the actual following of what we've heard, whether it be about the mind, whether it be about chanting? There's so many dimensions of Bhagavad Gita that are philosophical, psychological, and most importantly, it's applicable. And we just have to understand it and then apply in an effective way. So hearing, reflection, and then assimilation, incorporating it into our whole lifestyle. And then finally, and this is a key, and I attribute anything that I've learned thus far in the 51 years that I've been studying Gita, sharing it. It's a real number one source of inspiration. When you try to articulate, what you understand from Gita to others, there's a certain blessing that comes from that endeavor. When you make the endeavor to try to explain it as you've realized it, two things happen. Well, many things happen. One is you yourself become inspired to further read. Secondly, by articulating a philosophical point, you are challenging yourself. Do I really understand what I'm talking about? So you're challenging yourself. And thirdly, you are making the endeavor to perform an action which has ultimate benefit for society. There's shreyas and preyas. So ultimate actions, shreyas, are ultimately beneficial, and preyas, actions and words which are immediately beneficial. So we cultivate a lifestyle and a mindset which gives us immediate gratification. Whereas in the process of yoga, it is challenging us to cultivate a lifestyle and a mindset that tunes into thoughts, actions that are ultimately beneficial. So according to the Vedic paradigm of learning, if you make the endeavor to share what you have learned, some realization, some philosophical point, then there's a special blessing in that you become a recipient of. And it's just absolutely amazing when you do that, you make that effort, and you begin to realize, number one, how deep is that point? That's very deep. And number two, somehow or another, I'm getting a little bit of a handle on what's being spoken here in the Gita. So I just wanted to share that with you. I think it's an important point. We're going to continue where we left off in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6. This chapter is appropriately entitled Dhyana Yoga. If you've studied Yoga Sutras, you know that the Ashtanga Yoga system is comprised of Yama, Niyama, Pranayama, Asana, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. So this chapter is called Dhyana, and it's really contemplative. It's a process of contemplation. And I was just thumbing through some notes from previous time, and an important point to understand is you can be a deep practitioner of yoga without doing one asana, because there are different dimensions to yoga in terms of what you are doing and how you are doing it. So there's a deeply contemplative and meditative dimension to yoga, and it doesn't necessarily require asana, because asana means to be seated comfortably. And oftentimes the pendulum in asana swings to the side of focus on physical postures, whereas that, if you study Yoga Sutras, it's only mentioned a few times in the Yoga Sutras, and I think Krishna mentions it twice in Bhagavad Gita. The emphasis is not there. In later years, more towards contemporary yogas, like Hatha Yoga and Vinyasa Yoga and the various more contemporary forms of yoga, the emphasis was on that. Certainly it has its value. It certainly can facilitate sitting comfortably for meditation, but it is not of the utmost importance, or it is not a primary qualification to enter deep into yoga. Understanding the philosophy and psychology of yoga, that is very, very important. And I really applaud yoga studios, yoga studio owners that make it an emphasis, to train their yoga in their yoga teacher training class, their teachers on the philosophy and psychology of yoga. All right, so we are on chapter 6, Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation. And I believe we left off, I think I did 10. Yes, I did 10. So we are beginning with 11 and 12. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusha grass on the ground and then cover it with a deerskin and a soft cloth. The seat should be neither too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities, and fixing the mind on one point. So practice yoga, the word practice can be in Sanskrit, sadhana, means to practice regularly over a long period of time. So to practice yoga. Now, Krishna says here, this is the ancient system of yoga. Consider, Krishna spoke this over 5,000 years ago. One should go to a secluded place, and then he outlines what the yogis of the time used. Kusha grass, which is considered a sacred grass, and it's also both kusha grass and deerskin are supposed to be repellents towards all kinds of critters that disturb one in terms of their meditation, like snakes and various types of bugs and things like that. So the seat should be neither too high nor too low, and should be situated in a sacred place. One of the challenges, one may say, well, here I am in Boca Raton, Florida. Where is there a sacred place in Boca Raton? There's lots of gratification here, but where's the sacred place that I can practice? So for us that are stranded here in the Western world, and it's not very practical for us to leave our situation right now and go to a holy place like Vrindavan or Rishikesh, or any one of the numerous holy places in India or in other parts of the world, chakra points I call them. It behooves us to create within our own dwelling a sacred place. Like, for instance, in my house, my living room, I mean, how many people use their living room, really? I mean, I remember going over to, I come from an Italian family, so it was quite common for the family to get together on different occasions, whether it be birthdays or Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter or things like that. So it was very common for us to go over each other's houses. And particularly I had an aunt who was a very good cook, and she would host us. And I was very close to her. She had no children. I was very close to her and her husband. And the one thing I used to ask her all the time, she had plastic see-through covers on her living room sofa. And we never went into that living room. Never, ever. We always sat in the kitchen. She had a big kitchen extended, and we always sat in the kitchen. And no matter how many people came over, 15 people, they'd all be around the kitchen table. So, I also thought, how much do we use our living room? So we converted our living room into our temple room, our meditation room. So we have a sofa there and not much else, but we have our altar for meditation and our sacred texts, they're all there. And we do sit in our living room quite often because we chant our japa meditation there. So that's, in our house, that's what we did. Yeah, the bedroom's for sleeping, so you leave those alone. The bathroom is for doing our duty. You leave those alone. The kitchen is for cooking. It can be a sacred place also. But this living room, or any room in your house, depending on, what kind of facility you live in, a small or a large facility, you can create into a sacred place. And just by the presence of sacred texts or deities or beautiful pictures of Bhagavan, you can actually create within your home Vrindavan. You can have Radha and Krishna there, and wherever there's Radha and Krishna, that's Vrindavan. So you can create a sacred. So when Krishna says situated in the sacred place, for us, given our situation, that is what we can do. We can create that sacred place. And then we sit there very comfortably. And I don't mean like laying back or anything like that, but I mean back straight according to your condition. If you're an elderly person, just use a chair. If you are a practicing yogi and you have good asana you can do, the Padmasana, and then you do that to the best of your ability, and you sit comfortably so that the mind is free from distraction and can become very peaceful. And if you do, like I do, japa meditation on sound, vibration mantra, then very peacefully you can get into your mantra that way. And Krishna says here, why are we doing this? Well, the chanting of the meditation that you enter into, in my case, japa meditation, first and foremost purifies the heart. What is the heart contaminated by? The heart is contaminated by Rajagun and Tamagun. That is Rajagun means action, the urge to be active, creative, move, mind moving, body moving, all this activity going on. And it leads to attachments, So Rajagun is one of the disruptions when we try to obtain a peaceful mind state. And Tamagun is ignorance, the mode of ignorance. And that's laziness, indolence, sleep, all the things that are kind of contrary to the mindset you need to be in order to practice yoga. In yoga, you need to have a body that is relaxed and a mind that is alert. So, sitting in particular postures helps to relax the body. And if you're sitting properly and breathing properly, you do diaphragmatic breathing, and then it helps the mind to stay calm but alert. So this is what Krishna is saying. By your meditation, you are purifying the heart from the contamination or the influence of the gunas. And gunas means the constitution of the material energy around us: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. Krishna delineates what is the composition of the material energy in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. That combination has forces or influences. So it influences us in a particular way. It has such a profound influence on us that we have an inclination towards Rajagun and Tamagun, especially in modern day world, the world which is full of weapons of mass distraction that gives us so many things to draw us away from being contemplative and to be active. The one thing I can say, the one thing I do is I try to be an observer. It's not that I'm free from the influence of passion and ignorance, but I really try to be an observer and really try to see when I'm being influenced in that regard when it comes to my meditation. Oh, that cell phone is so tempting when I'm chanting japa. It's so tempting, I just want to check the weather today. I just want to do this. My mind is coming up with so many different arguments as to why I should be distracted from my japa meditation. And it's not to say that it doesn't happen, but as the observer, I stand back and say, no, this is not ideal for your japa time. And also I have a voice in the background called wife, and she'll be calling out from another room, "You're not on your cell phone, are you? It's japa time." So I have two voices, one in my head and one external voice that always tries to bring me, back where I should be. And that's what we have to do. Krishna says it, he gives that example that we're like tortoises. We have to withdraw as the tortoise withdraws its limbs, that when our senses are going out, it's japa time, it's dhyana, yoga time, it's meditation time. It's our time to connect through our meditation with the Supreme. Then, when we detect that we're starting to get drawn out, drawn away, then we have to be that observer and catch it and then draw it back, bring it back to where we should be. And the more we do that, the more we make the effort. It's just like if you perform asana, when you first do an asana, oh, that's so hard to get the body into that position, the warrior pose, or whatever challenging pose. Everybody, all the yoga students, they all have their challenges when it comes to various asanas. But when you do it repeatedly and you have that good teacher there with you who's saying, "Oh no, I was doing vinyasa yoga in Puerto Rico, and one of my good friends, Nieki Gonzalez, who is an incredible teacher, very experienced teacher, very kind and loving teacher, but very tough." And she would always come over and, "Okay, Lakshmi, bring that leg in, don't cheat, and you need that kind of teacher. You need the kind of teacher that you can trust more than your mind. That's the kind of guide we need in any aspect of our yoga practice. The kind of guide that we need, and we all do need guides. Krishna says that in the 4th chapter. We need to find the guide that we trust more than we trust our mind. because our mind is going to come up with so many excuses. My son and I have an ongoing dialogue. Who are you listening to? Your mind or your intelligence? Because intelligence and proper guidance has to be able to override the mind. Because the mind is quick trigger and the mind can be very easily deviated. So we need the guide that we can trust more than the mind. And that will pull us back. Controlling the mind, without controlling the mind, you cannot perform yoga. Krishna says that in numerous places in the Bhagavad Gita. The mind must come under, and the senses must come under control. We must make the effort to do that. In my own bhakti yoga practice, Rupa Goswami, who's a preeminent teacher, acharya in our lineage, he says, there are forces, or another word could be urges, vigam in Sanskrit. And he says, if those urges are controlled, you are a Swami. And if those urges are not controlled, you are a servant of those urges. So he would say, do you want to be Goswami, means a controller of those urges, or do you want to be Godas, a servant of those urges? And he says, Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udara Upashta Vegam. So points out that the tongue, two strong urges, urge to taste food and urge to speak. So those are two of the six. Control that. How do you control the urge to eat? Then you understand. I've found, my wife's an Ayurvedic doctor as well as a medical doctor. I found through her an immersion in Ayurveda that the Ayurvedic system really gives us good guidance on what to eat. A lot of people think that they're eating well, and when you really study the science of eating as applied to you and in terms of your ultimate well-being, your ultimate health, you find out that you're eating the wrong foods, that are foods that may seem to be healthy, and objectively they may be healthy, but not for you because of your dosha or the imbalance that you may have. Like a lot of people love fruit, but fruit in the evening and fruit in the morning is not a good thing, because fruit is raw food, and raw food, according to Ayurveda, has to be heated up and digested. And the weakest times of the day for your digestion system is morning, especially earlier morning, and evening. And therefore, someone may say, I'm only eating fruits in the morning. For a vata, that's devastating to eat only fruits, raw foods in the morning. And it will exacerbate the vata condition, which means nervousness, anxiety, joint stiffness and pain, and the list goes on. So control, and Rupa Goswami says, control your eating through knowledge. Control, the other aspect of the tongue he talks about is Vachavegam, speaking, what you talk about. Rumor mongering, gossip, criticism, fault finding, these are all aspects of the speech part, the Vachavegam part, the speaking part, that has to be controlled. Because it does nothing but contaminate consciousness. When you perpetuate rumor mongering, gossiping, fault finding, criticism, etc., it does nothing but contaminate. So, two very important. Manasa, control the mind, Rupa Goswami says. Krodha, anger. Anger, according to Narottam Das Thakur, anger spoils everything. We have to control the anger aspect. And belly's tied into tongue and eating. You just don't eat to fill the belly. According to Ayurveda, you only eat till your belly is half full. You don't just full the belly. Because I know when I have a full belly, then I have a hard time with digestion. So if you have a pitta imbalance, your digestive issues, assimilation issues, it's going to be a disturbance. It's not going to be beneficial. So, all of these things, these are all aspects of control. When we know conscious eating, proper eating, when we practice controlling our tongue, I always tell people that you should edit your speech. In other words, you can get away with answering a question with a simple yes or no. But when you say yes, but, and then you go on a whole tirade about, it usually has the effect of disturbing the person. And I always catch myself as the observer, I always catch myself as, I could have really made this conversation really brief and avoided anger and disturbance by just answering the question instead of some kind of pompous justification for what I did or didn't do. So these are all practices that we have to implement in terms of control, sense control, mind control, etc. And it will help us. It will help to control the mind. And Rupa Goswami says, if you've achieved the ability, the intelligence, the purified intelligence to control those urges, you, my friend, are a Goswami. You are a controller of the senses, and you are qualified to teach all over the world. Okay, 13 and 14. Now Krishna gets into more of the asana. One should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. So, Krishna is teaching Arjuna how to meditate here. Here's the posture. Hold one's body erect. Body, neck, and head in a line. I went to a chiropractor today, and the chiropractor was quite good. And, he saw the different things that were going on, the blockages that were there. And he put me on a decompression table, which stretched out my spine and everything. And afterwards, I actually literally, physically was experiencing a greater, less obstructed flow of energy that was going right to my brain. I felt a little clearer in my mind. The energy level was very steady. It was a steady, stable, and strong energy. So there's a science to this, and anyone who practices yoga knows that this kind of posture is creating, a nice flow of the energy that goes up the spine. So Krishna says that. And then he says that one should stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Now, my teacher makes a specific point that one should not close their eyes. And herein, Krishna is saying, the posture of meditation is not closed eyes, but one, you can partially close your eyes. But the tendency, especially for a neophyte meditator, the tendency is when you close your eyes is you go to sleep. And that's not meditation. Meditation means your body can get relaxed, but your mind has to be, your awareness level has to be acute, has to be very sharp. So that Krishna is saying here, stare at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, and we talked about, the different elements, the external environment, the internal environment, etc., that helps to create the breathing process. I frequently do diaphragmatic breathing. And even now, if you talk to physical therapists and people who are more in the know, they say that the best way to develop core development which means your stomach muscles and that area, is diaphragmatic breathing. Just breathing consciously and properly. And that develops your core area, how it becomes very strong and toned. So this is what's being recommended here. Mind will be subdued, devoid of fear. How is fear? How do we become devoid of fear? Through knowledge. You become devoid of fear and doubt through knowledge. That is why the recommendation for Swadhyaya is there, both in Bhagavad Gita and in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Swadhyaya. Meditation on sacred text and self-study. This is very important. And then fearlessness only can develop truly when one understands that they're not their body, that who I am is an eternal soul, jiva. That is who I am, which is temporarily using the body, that facility, like a machine. And Krishna even describes it in Gita, yantra rudhani mayaya, machine made of material energy. So Krishna makes that reference, and that is there. So we have to be conscious of that. So what do we fear? What's fear? What is the fear that we have? Well, most people fear death, right? Most people fear rejection. There's some really core fears that influence a lot of people. And depending on how many of those fears you have accumulated, then it depends how strong the mind is, which according to yoga understanding would be a weak mind. If your mind is strong, that's really a weak mind, because the intelligence can dictate to the mind what is best. The intelligence is the ability to discern, to draw a distinction between what is best for me and what is not good for me. So the weak mind is the loud voice that always wins, and it's weak because it is creating situations that are causing you suffering. That's why Krishna gives the secret in the second chapter. Yeah, he says, Matra sparshasta kontya sitoshna sukha dukkada agama payano nitang titikshashva bharata. The secret is the ability to tolerate all the dualities that we go through. And when we learn to tolerate, then that is a great secret in terms of our advancement in meditation. Subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life. And this means it cannot be so all-pervasive that everything you see in a sexual connotation, either subtly or grossly. And most people who are a little together can control their gross desires. But when it sublimates itself to subtle, it means adoration, distinction, and fame, adoration, and distinction. When it sublimates that desire, it's like, I want to be famous. I want to be recognized. I want to be adored. I want to stand out from the crowd. So that's called subtle, the subtle aspects. What defeats that? Humility. Cultivating a humble state of mind. Not a weak state of mind. People sometimes confuse humility with a weak state of mind. Someone who is, not strong, not stable. No, humility requires strength. Just like I had a little discussion with my son the other day, and I was telling him that if you continue to lie, that is showing that you're not a brave person. So if you pride is not brave, but being humble, recognizing my position as a spirit soul, respecting all other living entities, and one can legitimately assume a humble position, devoid of low self-esteem. See, people try to equate humility with low self-esteem. No, low self-esteem means just fearful. Humility does not mean fearful. Humility means strength. There's a certain strength that comes in living in truth, living in honesty, and not being afraid of truth. The truth sets you free, not being afraid of truth. These are really important elements to understand. So that humble state of mind, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Shikshashtakam prayers says, Trinadapi Sunichena, Torodapi Sahishnuna, Amanida Manadena, Kirtaniya Sadahadi. So, first thing he mentions in order to meditate on the sacred names of divinity, of God, first thing he mentions is humility. What's the second thing he mentions? And it's no coincidence that he puts it in that order. The second thing that he mentions, just like in the ingredients on a box, what is most in that box, where most the primary ingredient is first. So it's no coincidence that he says humility. The second ingredient, in order to meditate, to be able to focus on your meditation, is tolerance. Here's tolerance again. And the third ingredient is amanidena, not seeking the fame, the adoration, the distinction. And what is the last thing that he mentions? The four items that he mentions, the last one that he mentions is respecting all living entities. That doesn't mean someone who's stronger than you, more intelligent than you, more famous than you, more wealthy than you, etc. It means respecting all living entities. Why? Because all living entities are spiritual. All living entities are of the constitution of Brahman, Sat, Chit, Ananda. All living entities, anything that displays life, either very subtly or overtly, is because they are jiva or atma, and they emanate from the jiva into material body consciousness. Consciousness does not come from the material elements. Consciousness comes from the soul, the atma, the jiva. And from that pure spiritual presence, we get consciousness pervading all throughout the body. Just as the sun is situated in the universe and the sun energy emanates all throughout the universe, depending how close or far you are from it, there's varying degrees of contact with that energy. The soul situated in the heart, that's why the heart is always considered a very important, when you read sacred texts or poems about divinity or one's relationship with God, there's always mention of the heart, because the heart is considered the temple of the body. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of the great masters in the bhakti lineage, says, Momona mondire rohani siddhi Krishna murari si Krishna murari. So momona mondire, the temple of my heart. There I want to situate, I want to install the deity, my divinity, my deity of Krishna. See Krishna Murari. I want to install in the temple of my heart. And in order to install in the temple of your heart that divinity of the Supreme, it has to be clean. That's why we discussed earlier the yoga process. One of the main initial functions of the yoga process is to purify the heart. Because without purification of the heart, you cannot install the Supreme there. And there's a whole Leela, the pastime of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, just in emphasizing the cleansing of the Gundicha temple in Jagannath Puri. So I just want to keep track here. Okay, good. We have some time. Does anyone have any question or any lights or bells go off that you want to share with us?
Would you say humility is fearless?
Yes,
Good.
I would definitely say to be humble is to be fearless. And you look at all the examples of humility throughout the sacred text. Look at Hanuman. Hanuman is your consummate bhakta, but he was supremely humble and supremely powerful and fearless. And you go through history and you just tick off all the great personalities, Prahlad, Dhruva, all of the great personalities in our lineage in particular that are there in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Purana, and you see that they are fearless, or they become fearless if they take seriously to the process of purifying the heart. They may not start out fearless, but they become fearless by virtue of realization about the true nature of the self. So I would say being humble is a very strong position, courageous position to be in. Any other one? Any other question or epiphany?
I am reading this, the Bhagavad Gita, as it is, but in Spanish. And till now, the translation is perfect because I'm listening to you in English. But here in text 10, I find that it says a transcendentalist. Is that the way it says in English? For a yogi?
Atra, a transcendentalist?
Yeah,
Yes,
for
that's
a
the
yogi?
yes.
Why would they choose that?
Why would Prabhupada choose that? Because he wants to show that a yogi is a transcendentalist, which means very specifically that a yogi is meditating on one of the aspects of ultimate reality, ultimate Brahman, meaning, according to the Bhagavad Purana, or the Srimad Bhagavatam, then he says, Brahman eti paramam eti Bhagavan iti shabhyate, that ultimate reality can manifest itself, himself, in three ways: as Brahman, and therefore a Jnani yogi is a transcendentalist because he's meditating on Brahman, which is above, because what does transcend mean? To rise above. So a yogi, Jnani yogi, a yogi of knowledge who's meditating on various Mahavakshas, the To Brahma Jignasa, and all the different ones that I am Brahman, all the different ones that are there, that he is approaching the Supreme through Brahman. He's trying to link up, because yoga means to link up. And a Jnana yogi tries to link up with Brahman through the process, the system of yoga, known as Jnana yoga, or synonymously could be Sankhya yoga. And even Dhyana yoga is a division, considered a division of Jnana yoga. But ultimately, there. But then we get into the nuance of Dhyana yoga trying to focus on the supreme within the heart, that the full awareness of Atma and Paramatma, the soul, the individual soul, which we are within this body, and the presence of the supreme in the form of super soul, Paramatma. See, because the difference is the finite soul is enveloped within the body, even though it is fully cognizant, due to being in that body and not being pure, being conditioned by its connection with the elements of that body, then the soul can come under the misconception that I am that body. Paramatma never falls prey to that. That's the difference. So there's finite Brahman, the finiteness of the jiva, and then there's infinite Brahman, which is the totality of Brahman, but also the infiniteness comes in the form of Bhagavan also. Bhagavan is also infinite Brahman, but has a form. Not a form like you or I. We got our form due to karma. You are exactly in the body, Eleanor, that you're supposed to be in. You're a female body, born where you're born, of the socio-economic status that you were born in, due to your karma. And I'm the same way. Male body, exactly where I'm supposed to be. We're all exactly where we're supposed to be because of what we did in previous lives. We earned it. We earned our rewards, and we earned our suffering. Paramatma never comes under that sway. So Patanjali and the classic yoga system is more focused on that, the Paramatma feature at best. And then the third is Bhakti and Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga, really, according to Prabhupada, is more the beginning stages of Bhakti. So the Bhakti yogi is focused on Bhagavan, the supreme Brahman, Param Brahman. Brahman, according to the Bhakti yoga tradition, that personality, Krishna, Vishnu, that personality is the embodiment of all the three elements. And it's the only yoga system that teaches that. Jnana yoga teaches any form is Maya, is part of the illusion. Even Krishna, Ram, Shiva, Brahma, all of these various personalities, they are simply transformations of the mode of goodness. Brahman coming into this world and having a transformation, and then assumes form. And when ultimately one elevates, becomes a transcendentalist, and elevates and connects to Brahman, all form disappears. So therefore, Bhagavan has no reality. Paramatma has no reality according to Jnana Yoga. And similarly, in the classic yoga system, there is no concern for Bhagavan. There's mention of Ishvara by Patanjali, Ishvara Pranidhan, when he talks about Kriya Yoga as one of the three practices. But it's really, Patanjali was trying to be more secular in his approach to yoga, so that he can, number one, he can incorporate all the yoga systems that were out there into a kind of digestible presentation. And so he wasn't really concerned with Ishvara so much, God. He was, to the degree that he says this is the best option for meditation, etc. But he really wasn't pushing it. Where in the Gita, Krishna is just coming out and saying, Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskaru, meditate on me, always think of me, worship me, be my devotee. Krishna is just coming right out and saying, this, I am Bhagavan, and you engage, you connect to me through bhakti. And when you connect with me in bhakti, you experience love in its purest, unadulterated form, and which provides the most intense form of experience, because it's not devoid of emotion. See, Patanjali's yoga, Jnana yoga, is devoid of emotion, considering any emotional experience to be illusion. Whereas in bhakti, no, the emotion is transformed, transcendentalized, or as Prabhupada would say, Krishnaized. In other words, we experience the love emotion in its pure form, in relationship to the Supreme, where there is selflessness. The love that we experience in this mortal world has an element of selfishness. It has expression of selflessness, but in general, the overall motivation has some selfish concern. Whereas in bhakti, there's total selflessness in relationship to love exchange or love reciprocation between the jiva, the finite Brahman, and the Param Brahman, the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Lord. That reciprocation is pure, unadulterated, and ever increasing. And to underscore that point, we'll see at the end of the 6th chapter, the question arises, is any approach to the absolute reality as perceived in either Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan, is anyone more complete than the other? And Krishna is very definitive when he says yes. He says bhakti, love and devotion to Bhagavan. Why? Because the understanding of divinity, supreme, in all of its features, is that Brahman is sourced from Bhagavan. It is an emanation of Bhagavan's energy. And Paramatma also is a manifestation of Bhagavan in this material world. Paramatma doesn't exist in the ultimate realm of devotion. It is an extension of the mercy of Bhagavan to give us association here in this material world. But eventually, as we advance in bhakti, Paramatma evolves to our specific alambana, our specific object of worship. Meaning, if we worship Sita Ram, then Paramatma in our heart is Sita Ram. If we worship Radha Krishna, Paramatma in our heart is Radha Krishna. Lakshmi Narayan, all the various divine couples that are manifesting to attract us. In other words, Sita Ram have a different mood, and those that are attracted to that mood, because Krishna says, as you approach me, I reward you accordingly. I respond, or I reciprocate accordingly. So some people cannot fathom the idea of God being a debauch. They can't fathom that idea because Krishna plays. Krishna is always playing. And some people, what? God has a girlfriend? Are you kidding me? God steals butter? Oh no, I can't get this. So they would prefer approaching divinity, God, in a more awe and reverential. Like if you study Sita Ram in the Ramayana, you see that Ram is the ideal person. So it's easy for someone to relate to God in that way. And if you look in the Abrahamic religions, how do they depict God? God is so far above us. In Islam, he is so out of our reach that you can't have any drawing of him or any notion of him. The closest you can come to him is through his prophet Muhammad. And even then, you can't even conceive of what Muhammad looks like. But not so in Bhakti. Bhakti says, God will manifest himself to you in one of the innumerable ways that he has manifested himself in this world to attract us. In the Aishwarya feature, which means awe and reverential, Sita Ram, Lakshmi Narayan, or in the more loose, hair down, God with his hair down form of Krishna playing. So who cannot be attracted to that? The only caveat to all that is that you have to be pure. You can't misunderstand what Krishna is doing and saying, oh, if Krishna's doing it, I can do it too. He's my example, so I'm going to go out and have 100 girlfriends too. So we'll stop here. Does anyone have any question or comment? Please.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful chapter, how you describe so many wonderful things. And I was thinking, this chapter is titled Dhyana Yoga. And you were mentioning how with us, we're practicing chanting japa, Krishna's names. And when you start your day with that, I find throughout the day, I'm more focused on what I'm supposed to do, rather than, anybody would come and distract me and say stuff that will agitate me. If I have not completed my rounds, I would be agitated. I noticed that. I said, okay, so I better utilize this time, the morning time, to, actually focus my mind and, all my attention there.
Yeah, and I use these pearls of wisdom to try to educate my son. And that's one of the points I mentioned to him. I said, how you start your day is going to affect you all throughout the day. So he has a tendency, as you know, to talk a lot. So I tell him, if you're just, you're unfiltered, unediting, not editing all the thoughts, and it just comes. I said, your day is just going to be an avalanche of things coming out of your mouth. So it's nice first thing in the morning. I know you're 8 years old and I know you have a lot of mental energy and intellectual energy, but if you make it, so on the way to school, we chant nice and slow. And I said, I want to prepare you for the day. So let's chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and then we'll do nice and slow, to get some condensed meditation in there for him. And it helps him because quite often he spontaneously breaks out into a kirtan. He'll just break out singing whatever, melody. He learns melodies on the harmonium with his teacher. He'll break out into a Hare Krishna melody. He'll break out into Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. He breaks out into Radhe Radhe Govinda, Jai Shri Radhe, So, and it's nice because you see, even though there's so much going on there, thankfully, there's also that going on there too. So it'll come out because everything comes out unedited, and so it'll come out. So that, but for us, hopefully we have a little bit more control than that. That if we start our day in that way, rise early, get up into Mangalarti, Mangala time of the day, the auspicious time of the day, which is, I think it's 2.5 hours prior to sunrise. If we can do that and then just, through a little breath work and deep meditation on your mantra, then that really has an impact. Like today, we've been so crazy here with the move, so chaotic, move and renovation. And my wife bought 300 plants, and now she's got me planning stuff, and she's planning. Everything's going on. So like today, I got up at 4:30, and I said, "Oh no, I'm not going to do anything but chant for 2 hours," and that's what I did. And the day, like you said, Ishwar, my day was just flowing. It just went from one thing to the other, and I had all my chanting in, and I was really, really focused and quite, stable and steady and everything, and always coming back to the class. I was always thinking of this point or that point and meditating on how I would present it, and I would read a little something and meditate on that. And, so you're right, that's why Ayurveda says cultivating a lifestyle. And part of the lifestyle that we cultivate is meditation. And to prove that point, if you go to Dr. Dan Gilbert from Harvard, or Dr. Laurie Santos from Yale, or Dr. Robert Waldinger, I think he's also out of Harvard, or maybe not. Maybe he's well, anyway, those three names, they've dedicated their lives, they're professors of psychology, they've dedicated their lives to the study of happiness. And what are the elements, when included in your life, makes you happy? And one of the things that they came up with through their research was meditation. Another thing which is really high on the list is social connectivity. And they emphasize good association. And that's our principle in Bhakti Yoga. Our principle in Bhakti Yoga is, what's detrimental to your bhakti? Bad association. What's beneficial to your bhakti? Good association, and avoiding bad association. So we don't need their research, but to me, I find it, because some people, are afraid of faith, and to bring up these points, I think is important to show that if you just step back and object, you're not a Hare Krishna or you're not a Bhakti Yoga practitioner, you just step back and you just look at it objectively, which they tried to do. What are those elements? And those are the two first and foremost elements that they talk about: social connectivity, positive, and meditation. Any other question or comment or realization or observation? Please feel free to raise your hand or activate your voice.
I will have to watch the video again, because you said something about the soul going to Paramatman, and it sounded to me kind of Advaita, and this is not Advaita. So to make a proper question, I will have to watch the video again.
Well, I'll just reiterate that point really quickly. In the Mundaka and Svetashvatara Upanishad, the metaphor that's used is two birds sitting in a tree. So the two birds represent the jiva and the supersoul, Paramatma, Atma, and Paramatma. So the Paramatma is the witnessing or observing aspect. And the other bird is the trying to enjoy all the fruits, et cetera, and not getting ultimate contentment or satisfaction eventually turns to the other bird. And in this way, that's how they're connected. They don't become one, but they become, Paramatma is always cognizant of Jiva and its position. But Jiva is not always cognizant of Paramatma unless and until Jiva turns to Paramatma and consciously makes the connection or attempts to make the connection. Just like Arjuna, when Arjuna was situated in his vishada, his desperation, his despair, what did he do? He realized that he cannot conquer over this despair, and he turns to Krishna and seeks guidance. So that's what I meant when I said that. They don't become one, but they become in relationship, close relationship with each other. Okay, does that clarify it?
A lot. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Is that Luna? Did you want to say something?
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm
If you're trying to say something, I don't hear you. I don't think you can be heard.
sorry. Where is this?
It's the speaker. I know. I empathize with you. I'm a dinosaur when it comes to things, but I do.
Sorry, I'm in my car and I
Oh,
hit
okay.
the button as a result.
Okay.
Trying
You have an excuse. I don't, but I do know it's the microphone on the bottom.
Yes, and I was trying to get to the button, but thank you so much. I wanted to join you guys since you started, but many different reasons that I haven't been able to, but this was wonderful and I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And you're always
Say
welcome.
hello to your wife and son, and my son says hello to you guys as well, Stefan.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm glad you were able to catch it tonight.
Yes, thank you so much. Very meaningful to me. So thank you.
Any question or comment? If not, okay. You have a question, Eleanor? Oh, you're saying goodbye. Okay.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Okay. All right. You all have a happy, healthy, and holy week coming up, and we'll see you again soon. So, good night and Jai Shri Radhe.
Sham.